friends, my name is Richard Mumford. I'm with Climbing Innovations, and the title of today's video is What Do We Call It? There is momentum to simplify the acronyms of the climbing systems we use. Perhaps it comes from missed or forgotten elements of these techniques, but I think much is lost in doing this. These acronyms are designed to be general in nature, but should be easily understood without being so broad they become almost meaningless. Many times things look the same until we see the differences. There has always been some confusion between DRT and DdRT, and I think a slight modification fixes that. SRT, or single rope technique. For one, it has a free end and a fixed end, and they will most likely be out of reach of the climber. Let me show you what I mean. If I'm climbing on what we would typically call SRT, I could have some kind of a cinched canopy anchor, and I could be down here on the line climbing to that fixed end. I could also have a base anchor. This end of my line could be connected to the base. It could be connected to another part of the tree. It could be connected to another tree nearby. But again, I would be climbing on this part of the line, and that anchor would be out of reach. Number two, it may be on a static or a dynamic rope. Number three, it may be stationary, or it may be perhaps moving. Now, I know a lot of you guys are thinking, can't be moving. Let me just show you a demonstration. This is what I use when I'm teaching SRT rope walking. So the way it works, I call it the rope master. It's either an exercise machine or it's a training technique. I'll have a pencil rig, or you can even have a figure eight or a carabiner with a munter. And then down here, I'll have a length of rope. It could be 200, 300 feet, depending on how much exercise the person wants. So I become the fixed end. In other words, I have control over it. It can be either completely stopped, or I can let a little rope out. On the other side, I'll have a climber over here, and he'll be climbing SRT. And I can stand in front of that climber and give him some guidance about what kind of steps to make. Don't make bicycle steps. Don't keep your feet side by side as they go up the rope. I can help them if they get stuck. I can just lower them right back down to the ground. There's no height that they have to worry about if they get stuck or they get caught. If they have difficulties undoing the cam on their ascender, I can explain that to them, or I can just simply put them on the ground. We work out how the cams work, and the climber can go back up the rope. It's a very simple system, but as the climber is doing that single rope technique, this rope is traveling up and over all the anchors and feeding out of my 600-foot bag. So indeed, the rope is very much moving, but again, it's a single rope technique. Using the same single rope technique, I can establish a yo-yo system. For a climber, a 3-to-1 mechanical advantage. If I'm hoisting somebody, a 2-to-1 mechanical advantage, but is still very much on a single rope using the single rope technique. Additional ropes can be added, but it's still very much a single rope technique. You can have two single rope techniques side by side. It's often used in industrial access. It's becoming more popular in arboriculture, but it's still very much a SRT, or single rope technique. It's just done multiple times. DRT, or double rope technique. And I'll preface this with, let's not get all hung up on the fact that it's still one rope, all right? It's not what single rope means. It can be two ropes that are tied together, and it can be whatever it takes to make that. That's not the point. And I'd rather not get all tied up, excuse the pun, in that. That's not the point. In DRT, it usually means that a single rope is doubled over something. It goes up and over something. It's doubled over an object. It has two fixed ends. Most of you have seen DRT used in competitions, or many times climbers will climb up DRT using a foot locking technique. This is a Rock Exotica dual sender. Not something I actively climb on, but it's an interesting piece of gear. Petzl makes a shunt that also is used for dual lines, floating anchors and such. It's significant to have the fixed ends on a DRT system at the climber, because either one of these ends can be released and the line can be recovered without going to the anchor. That's extremely significant when your understanding is being used and how it's being used. Again, a single line is being used. Also, the rope is stationary. As a person climbs, the rope is not moving. Another point is that two ropes are stronger than one, although it's just as vulnerable as one. If I cut one of these legs, it's the same as having one line. But as far as strength is concerned, I'm connected to two lines. Again, these are all extremely significant when you're understanding what you're dealing with. This technique, DRT or doubled rope technique, can easily be converted into what I'm going to propose it be called a DmRT, or doubled moving rope technique. As we have both fixed ends here, it's very easy. Note if I tie one of these ends off. If I tie one of these ends off and now turn it into a completely fixed end and allow this to be the free end, what happens when I pull down? I've instantly converted this over to a doubled moving rope technique. It's exactly DRT, but now the rope is moving. So we're going to talk about that next. I can convert either side of that to the fixed end and the free end. When I pull down on the free end, I turn into a DmRT, doubled moving rope technique. So this is what I would, and it really makes sense to me, call a DmRT, doubled moving rope technique. It usually means that a single rope is doubled over something, just like DRT. It has a fixed end and a free end, and both are at the climber. So the free end is allowed to pass the climber, and the fixed end is attached to the climber. Again, just a single rope is used. The rope is moving. It's not stationary. It employs a mechanical advantage. If I'm climbing on this, this is connected to my saddle, and I pull down and it brings me up, I'm using a 2-to-1 mechanical advantage. Again, two ropes are stronger than one, but again, it's just as vulnerable as one. And as I previously showed, DmRT easily converts back to DRT and vice versa. This is actually rather amusing, so I'll just make the point with it. But again, this is the DRT system, right? It has two fixed ends, both of these. It's interesting if you've ever tried to climb on this just for fun. But what happens if you put a foot ascender on each side? I'm not promoting this. I'm not saying it's efficient or anything else. It just brings to point what we're talking about. But it's an alternating DmRT as you take each step, up the rope you go. It's a weird way to climb, but it makes the point. Going straight up 2 ropes, nothing is moving. It's DRT, no mechanical advantage. As soon as I fix either side, it becomes a doubled moving rope technique. And that can be done, like I said, by taking individual steps as you go up the rope. Just thought that would be rather amusing. So as we can see, just a few more letters, and it adds so much more meaning and understanding. If you're going to rescue someone, or you're just trying to get a picture of what the climber is doing, knowing and using these acronyms can get you very close to that understanding. One last thing, it's a technique, not a system. As the exact same components that make up the system, as I've just demonstrated, may result in an entirely different technique, depending on how they are used at that particular time. Thanks for watching. Okay, I just did that video on climbing systems, and I think it's very appropriate that climbers understand those differences. And evidently, a lot don't. And this is, of course, related to my own issues. But here is an example of a fixed end and a free end, what they're talking about. It can be a fixed end tied off at the top of the load, right there, or it can also be a free end and a fixed end tied off inside the load. And that couldn't be clearer to me as to the importance of that fixed end and the free end and how it relates to the object. If it was attached up here, it would be accessible, and I could release that load from here. All right, and if I'm over here at this other end someplace, then I can't reach it. I can't release it. But the point is, if it's loaded here, I can release that load. I can whatever. If it's loaded inside the box or the load-bearing member, if it's inside there, then I'm connected. I've got this free end and I've got a fixed end. I can't release it. It's stuck inside there. I have to take the load-bearing member. I have to take this load apart in order to be able to access that fixed end. So now it's pretty obvious where we're going with this, right? I mean, that's two fixed ends. The fixed ends, both fixed ends are accessible, and I can release either one of these fixed ends without having to go up here or someplace else. I can release both of these fixed ends and release the load. All right, so this is pretty obvious, I think. So now I have two fixed ends. They are both externally located. They can be released, and the load can be released. Of course, I would like to have something up here to stabilize it, but that's not supporting the load. I mean, it is so obvious the difference between a fixed end and a free end versus two fixed ends. The advantages, one over the other, are pretty clear. Okay, so now let's get to the real point of the socket. The socket has a load-bearing member. I've gone over this. The load-bearing member. So what I've done is I've completely separated the two fixed ends and the bungee for the rebound. You know, everybody thinks this is all about having a bungee in a rope walker. That's not what it's about. This is what it's about. These are the claims, and I'm refuting these claims. These are simply to rebound the self-advancing knee ascender. The self-advancing knee ascender, I'll pull it up and I'll show you that it's load-bearing. There's webbing. Anyway, I'll get to that. So here you have the load-bearing member, the ascender that's carrying the load-bearing member, and there's the load. So this is bearing that load. When that load comes up, in other words, when the climber takes this step, it comes up. It has, the bungee has nothing to do with the load-bearing member. The load-bearing member is independent of the recovery of the entire, that's why it's called a self-advancing knee ascender. This whole unit advances by itself. Each time the climber takes a step, this load-bearing member bears the weight of the climber and is rebounded by the bungee. In this case, completely disconnected. Down here, I've got about 3 threads on each side that's holding it together. So when you look at the socket, here is the load-bearing member. There's a strip of webbing that goes all the way down around the carabiner, comes all the way back up, and it makes a complete circle. Then that is bolted to the ascender. It's a solid one-piece unit right there. Everything is connected. This is the load-bearing member with the ascender. This is just the bungee to make the whole thing come back up. Of course, it's nice to have that all come together like that, but I could go out there right now and climb with this the way it is. It's not as pretty though. And if needed, I could easily put just a piece of Velcro around that. I mean, how would that look? Wouldn't look good, but that's the function. We're talking about function right now, and putting a piece of Velcro around that or whatever is cosmetic. But the bungee does not run through the load-bearing member. I don't know how much more clear I can be about proving that point. And I think anybody and everyone understands that.